I'd like to think the most interesting, exciting and important topic to bring us home for the end of the day. The context of the discussion, and I don't think anyone would argue, is that the transport links, moving our people, our goods and our services into the aerotropolis will make or break the success of the aerotropolis in the short, medium and long term. And we have a great panel of experts here with deep knowledge and insight into all the areas that are relevant to have a good discussion around that today. From the planning of our New South Wales network, to the operations of our freight networks, to the city transforming metro network and the international perspective. So I'm looking forward to the discussion. Trudi, I'm going to start with you because you've warmed up with a couple of days of budget estimates, so this should be pretty easy. We have the 30-year transport plan. We have the recently hot off the keyboard aerotropolis sector plan from INSW and a recent announcement this morning from the Prime Minister. Could you unpack what all that transport strategy around the Western City region is in terms of what are the key takeaways for the latest thinking for that, and what is the sort of fundamental principles that are behind the strategy?
Yeah, thanks, Steve, and hi everyone. I'll try not to answer like budget estimates. Thank you for the question. It has been a long 2 days. So there is a lot to answer there. That's a pretty big question. What I thought was useful sharing is, yes, we did bring out in 2023 the integrated transport plan for the aerotropolis. That included obviously freight, public transport, roads and active transport, and what we saw for the medium to long term. In developing that, it took us a couple of years. So when I came into this role, I was like, we need to focus on WSA, what are we doing about it? And we worked with all of you. So we worked with all levels of government, we worked with industry and stakeholders, and everyone said the same thing. We need to know what you think the priorities are for the network, and we need to know when you're delivering them and what you've got money for. Fair enough, fair question. I was unable to include that in the 2023 plan, so I couldn't be more thrilled that we've got the sector plan now. I think it has brought that to the next level and brought transport into the picture with water and thought really about land use, growth, connections outside of the aerotropolis, and really importantly, what we see as the staging and sequencing of the different projects that need to occur at a minimum. We could have a long, long list, but when pushed to work out what we absolutely need over those horizons, I think we're really pleased to see that they're all represented in the plan. 21 projects, I think, in the sector plan for transport, 18 funded, so that's a great improvement from where we started a few years ago. I think the last question was about barriers, I think, was it?
Yeah, what are the sort of fundamental principles when you think about the Western Sydney plan?
Yeah, I think it is that. It's how we stage and sequence. And I understand that Minister Graham said, you know, there's a lot to do. The dates aren't set, but they do give a guideline to the order in which we will do things. And fundamentally, it's about putting capacity and getting the right growth into the network so that people can access the aerotropolis for jobs. And certainly, airport first day of openings have been a strong focus anyway for the past couple of years. But yeah, we're really pleased to see it.
And because I can't let you get off without a hard question, what are the challenges? What are the biggest challenges?
Yeah, I feel like government answer's always the same, that it's funding and investment. But I do think it's also, if you look at all of those projects, yes, there's staging and sequencing, but actually which ones will we get to do first, even within the tranche that they're mentioned in. So I think Kerry and I will talk about Western Sydney Freight Line, I'm sure, but you know, like that is a multi-billion-dollar project. You know, extensions to the rail network are multi-billion dollars, and we need the road access now while we wait for that. So I think it is the challenge of exactly when and which ones go first, as well as the funding. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Trudi. Kerry, I'm going to go to you next because freight often is considered last rather than early. And so I'd like to ask you about the work that you've been doing with your colleagues on the committee doing the New South Wales freight policy review. I know it's not ratified yet, changes of ministers and all that, but you have released some findings in your interim directions report. What can you share with us around your thinking around the changes to policy needed for freight in Sydney, but more importantly, as it relates to Western Sydney?
Just in terms of the freight report that has recently been done for the New South Wales Government, we did put out an interim directions report, which the final report doesn't have any great surprises in it on the back of that. One thing that report did was something that Dr. Sharmi would be very pleased about, which is to look at entire logistics change. And there is no point thinking about freight as just either the airport or a port or a terminal or a network. You've got to think of it all together. So the recent example of finding that you're going to work at a pharmaceutical plant behind sort of 10B doubles holding you up getting in the door is a very good example of a chain that is not working very well for what is frankly an idiotic reason. And it's those sort of little things that need to be thought about at a practical level when we're planning freight. And it's very important to think about those things around the airport as it develops. I just wanted to make 2 points about the airport and Western Sydney infrastructure. Around freight at the airport, air freight is actually quite a specific type of freight. It tends to be very time sensitive and very low in volume, of course, and very valuable. And the freight that passes through Kingsford Smith at the moment is largely time sensitive or temperature sensitive, and it's often electronics and it's often pharmaceuticals, and a lot of it is imports coming in rather than exports going out, which reflects our economy, frankly. And it tends to come in the belly of passenger planes. 80% of all freight by air comes in passenger planes, and it might surprise you to know that the airlines actually make an enormous money out of freight rather than carrying us around. It's about what's in the belly of the plane, often. And as the airport here grows, and as your passenger flights grow, so too will your freight. So don't think about freight as something that's on its own. It goes along with the passenger stuff. On Western Sydney Airport, you've got a couple of advantages. You haven't got a curfew, that's good. At Sydney at the moment, there's about 28 flights that come in that can come in without the curfew. So it's not that everything there is super restricted. And the other advantage you've got, I think, is the resilience that you're adding to the economy. There are times when Sydney's just absolutely not going to be able to work because of some catastrophe somewhere else. That means planes are all wanting to come in the middle of the night. And Western Sydney will provide an enormous resilience to that. I think the fact that Qantas and Singapore signed up to start here is great, and I think you'd expect that Qantas will move its Australian Post contracts and that sort of cargo here as well, and that will be regional as well as international. The other sort of air freight in Australia that gets a bit of airplay is agricultural produce, and that was mentioned a little bit this morning. But the stuff that gets flown around at the moment is largely seafood, largely from Queensland, and specialist types of agricultural produce that Asia in particular want to have delivered in absolutely prime condition and are willing to pay enormous amounts for. So I think when you think about air freight, you're thinking about special sorts of freight, and in horticulture, special sorts of horticulture and seafood and the like. Just one final point about infrastructure. I think Western Sydney generally needs two things particularly. The first thing that the airport needs is a fuel pipeline. At the moment, the fuel for the airport for the aircraft is going to come by tanker from Clyde across to the airport, and that'll be fine to start with, but once you've got a few aircraft landing, you will need a pipeline to avoid having trucks full of very flammable fuel going through suburbs. So that pipeline, I know Transport have done some work on the planning for that pipeline. That route needs to be worked out quickly. The contract to build the thing needs to be let by the airport, and it needs to be built. And instead of worrying about how to pay for this, everybody should work out that at the end of the day, it's airlines who are taking the fuel out of this, and they should be pinged for part of the cost of this pipeline. So there's private sector money that can go into the development of that pipeline. The other thing, Trudi just mentioned the Western Sydney freight line, which would be a rail freight line extending effectively from Moorebank through to Mamre Road and Erskine Park. That is an important rail link, but it's important because it would have a big intermodal terminal at the end of it, and it needs to be thought about in the same way that Moorebank was developed, so that you have private sector involvement in it. And Moorebank would now be making money for the federal government, who owns the terminal there, but it takes time. So again, the funding of it, people shouldn't sweat about. Between the rail link and the intermodal, you could probably get it to stack up after about a decade, but the government will need to put some money up the front. And I would suggest that the federal government would be up for some of that money because they've got expertise about how to develop intermodals now. So you mentioned money to the New South Wales government at the moment, and there's instant fright. I think we've just got to get over that sort of cringe and look at how to actually finance these things.
Thanks, Kerry. One of the topics that is sticky is that mode shift from road to rail and the challenges that are around that. Follow-up question for you is, in terms of making that change, which has such a big impact on the environment and efficiency, what are the policy settings or infrastructure requirements that we're going to need to do to make an impact on that mode shift? It's very important that we shift from road to rail where we can. Rail is better for bulk produce, and it's also better on longer haul, but we need to get it to work very well in shuttles. Like Sydney is blessed actually with having rail links through to Port Botany. Not very many ports in the world have rail links that are as efficient as that rail link, and we need to start getting more rail running, and we are doing that, which is getting some trucks off the M5, you'll all be pleased to know. But rail is actually much better for decarbonisation. Moving a tonne of freight on a rail line is about 40 times less carbon than doing it on a truck, even when it's a diesel loco that's pulling it. And it used to be the case that Sydney-Melbourne had pretty close to 20% of the freight moving by rail. It's now down below 5%. And those of you who travel on the Hume Highway would know that the amount of trucks on that route is going up all the time. So Western Sydney Airport needs to think about its road links and needs to, in due course, think about how to connect in to some of the intermodals which will be connected to rail. So I think freight links, we can't get freight trains through the Sydney Trains network much, it's very dense. Train coming from Brisbane to Sydney has to park outside at Hornsby more or less until after about 10 at night to be able to get through. This is not an efficient freight link. We've got to get direct routes around.
That's a longer term issue.
Anything you wanted to add to that, Trudi?
No, not really. I think that I certainly look forward to the final report, and I know we've worked closely with Kerry and the panel, and we think it will really step out the blueprint for what we can do to enhance freight. And I couldn't agree more about the opportunity to show the economic benefits and the long-term improvements that the changes we need to make to support the freight network will make. I think we have been lacking in putting that argument forward, so there's more we can do.
Thank you. Now, changing tack, metros. Angela, the city's embraced the metro lines that have opened so far. What can we expect when Western Sydney Airport line opens, the impact on the region, but importantly, how will that product be different to what we see in northwestern Sydney?
Well, we've had great feedback on the M1 line. People are voting with their feet. They're absolutely eager to get out of their cars and get on the metro. We've had 28 million people use the metro in the first 6 months. And interestingly, what we're seeing is people are using the metro on the weekend. So when we talk about what people can expect for the metro, the T3 line, which will service the airport in the future, what we can see through our customer engagement is, and continuation on things that people love about the M1 line. We have over 98% month-on-month customer satisfaction feedback. So it's a fully accessible line. So people don't need to wait for assistance to alight. They can do that, completely individually. They can make, we have access through lifts the whole way through. That will continue for the T3, for the M1 line. That will not change. Through our customer engagement, though, we've been able to work with people who are going to largely be using the line as a connection from Western Sydney to Western Sydney. So those easy, accessible arrangements that I've spoken about will continue. They'll be able to have their bike parking, so people who are wanting to connect to great amenities and great parks, they'll be able to do that easily. But for those who are accessing the airport, we've been able to engage with our customers about simple things like luggage storage. For it to not be where it might traditionally be at the entrance of a train, it will be easily stored under people's seats. So we've really been thinking closely with our customers about what it is that they want to see specifically for this metro, whilst without losing any of the great aspects of the metros that we've already delivered. We've worked closely with the airport and made sure that we've been looking at ways to make sure connecting with country is at the forefront of our solutions. So as people alight and they arrive to Australia possibly for the first time, and there's been lots of work at the airport about how to greet people and have a great response to connect with country. We've most certainly carried that through the airport terminal station. And on the rolling stock, we have Sydney Metro's largest public art project that is a response to connecting with country in the bespoke fabric solution. So, many aspects have been really well considered about how to respond to a specific airline, a specific airport metro.
Fantastic. And what are your thoughts about the importance of the extensions to the northwest and to the southwest to really open up the Western Sydney Airport line?
I mean, it's really important. Sydney Metro is Australia's largest funded transport project. It's $60 billion of investment. By 2032, there'll be over 40 stations and 113 kilometres of metro connecting parts of Sydney and really connecting Western Sydney. Those extensions obviously just build upon that. So being able to continue to connect Western Sydney, drive a catalyst for great jobs and great amenity in Western Sydney it's really important. So whilst there's been a huge investment and a great series of first steps, it needs to continue, and I think people really want to see it continue.
Thanks, Angela. Edgar, you've seen this story before in other places around the world. What are your reflections on the ability of transport links to open up new cities, precincts, and what are the key things that have been successful that we could take away for them to make sure we don't miss the opportunity here in Western Sydney?
Okay, I will give you maybe two extreme examples from different places of the world. The first one being where I come from, Paris. And the second one, maybe surprisingly, will be about Saudi Arabia. So what you said reminds me of the creation of the Line A of the regional train in Paris, which at the end of the 70s connected the center of Paris to a place where there was nothing by the time, landscape, in the eastern part of Paris, 30 to 40 kilometers from the center. Now this line is Europe's most crowded line. You have Disneyland over there. Somebody talked about Disneyland just a bit further. It's very interesting because in a way you have commuters coming in while at the same time you have people, tourists, visiting on the other side. And it's interesting in terms of ridership, you have both in both directions. Anyway, this proves that having a very performing rail system is really structuring for the development of the region. Now this line has a 1.2 million daily ridership. We needed to improve the system. We needed to bring automated train operation to improve it. And we are creating in Paris region new automated lines because it's really victim of its success. So this really helped the Paris region to develop to the eastern part, and it's now connected, of course, to high-speed trail. You can go easily to the French Riviera, etc. So this is a big proof that it's really structuring. Other example, other part of the world, in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh. We opened, my company, a few months ago, the metro, new automated metro in Saudi Arabia, capital city. It is really a big change that is happening right now in the Saudi Arabian society. Why? Because it provides all the people, including women, including all the layers of the society, the ability to move freely. In Saudi Arabia, women are not allowed to drive. So they could not move before. Now, here, they have the possibility to move inside the city and do, maybe not whatever they want, it's still difficult over there, but it's really a motor of change in the society and really a big factor for development. So you will see that it will now accelerate these changes. So I'm sure here that around this really beautiful project that you have here in Sydney, things will change very, very rapidly from now on, for sure. And all this will be made possible because of the good service that will be delivered through Sydney Metro. So it's great that you are investing here this way. And you will see that people will like to move in the places where the service will be the better. In Paris region, we have several automated lines. We converted legacy lines into automated ones. And now people really want to be very close to the lines that deliver the best service. So the prices and the activities, etc., is really moving towards the places where there's the best service. So that's why it's very important that you build automated lines here. It's great. And the service, you have to, around an airport, deliver the best service for all the people that will come from anywhere in the world. This is important, more important in an airport, because all the people that come out of the plane, they are tired, they may be stressed, so it has to be very smooth. The service has to be very smooth and accessible, etc. So, for instance, one of the innovations that we developed in Paris recently for the Olympic Games that we hosted last summer, and we had one of the automated lines that was extended to the south to reach the airport and connect more easily to a city center. We gave all our station people tablets with an app on it, with artificial intelligence dedicated to passenger information that could do real-time translation, real-time writing or speaking, to improve the service that would be delivered to the people coming from anywhere in the world. And it was really, really appreciated and very effective. So just an example to improve the service regarding this kind of ridership.
Yeah. Thanks, Edgar. Two panels ago, there was a discussion around tourism, and one of the things is, obviously opening up out of WSI, the tourism links. So we have the Blue Mountains to the west, we have the Illawarra to the south and other areas, and then we have the three or four main cities around Campbelltown, Liverpool, Penrith, etc. The connections from WSI into those cities and then beyond into the tourism regions. Question for all of you, are we doing enough? What's the plan, and are we doing enough? Maybe I'll start with you, Trudi.
I feel like that's for me.
Yeah.
Are we doing enough? I think we have a very solid plan. Of course, we would love to do everything all at once and build it and they will come, but we need to be sensible with the timing and the delivery of the work that we need to do. I loved the last panel. It was, aside from Australia's Wonderland anecdotes, which I loved, it was really great to hear that we're thinking about lifting the amenity and the use and the attraction and connection to the airport. Transport runs vibrancy programs and grants into councils that are really about activating communities, and I think we can use things like that to support tourism. Connections more broadly outside of the outer metro region and into metro really come down to that long-term work on rail connections that we are working on and need to continue doing. In the meantime, we're making sure that we have got the right access in place. Everyone knows the roads. We've already, M12 will be ready. We've built Bringelly Road, the Northern Road. There's been some really good backbone infrastructure put in place in the road space, and Elizabeth Drive's commenced. We have got the funding for many other roads, so I think we're doing all the right things. Would I like to do more? Always, Steve.
I mean, we are developing together, as Trudi said, a series of business cases for the extensions of the metro. So the federal and state government have co-funded a $100 million business case, which will be delivered to government for consideration next year. Also a $40 million investment of an extension to the north, again, ready for government's consideration next year. So the project really, makes sense when those connections are made. Your question specifically was around how do we connect the various cities. I think from a metro perspective, what's pretty amazing is, and growing up in Western Sydney and very close to St Mary's in particular, to get to university, it was a really long commute. To get to great amenities was a really long commute. I think the thing that I'm really proud about what we will deliver with this metro is you can live near St Mary's and get on a metro, turn up and go, exactly the same service as those people in the east get. And in 15 minutes, you're at the airport and off on your way to, you know, your fabulous holiday destination. Or in 20 minutes, you're at the Aerotropolis and you've got nighttime economy, access to parklands. You know, I think providing that for the people of Western Sydney is, again, it will be incremental steps, but to be able to do that and to continue to do that over time and to do that in a considered way that meets the population increase, you know, I think we're well on our way, and I'm really proud to be part of it.
I'm just looking at the Slido, and I think we've answered a number of the questions in and around the way. There's one there that I really liked as a final question for each of you, and it follows from Chris's concept earlier. If you've each got $1 billion to spend.
How many?
Only just a cool bill.
Sorry, not 60 billion.
Trudy would like 60 billion, just for the record. Okay. Well, let's make it real. Let's make it 10. If you had $10 billion more to support the development of the Aerotropolis, where would you spend it? Kerry, I might start with you.
I probably don't need 10 billion, but one thing that I would do is make sure that I had the corridor for the pipeline absolutely established, and probably start paying for the pipeline with that amount of money, if not entirely. One of the things about preserving corridors for freight or anything else is when you decide that you're going to preserve the corridor, you need to be able to buy the land. And as we all know in Sydney, if you don't do that immediately, it'll cost 10 times more a year later. So it's really important to actually have the money to be able to meet that liability. So it's not a terribly sexy way to spend money, but if you don't do that, it's going to cost much, much more later, and people just hesitate about securing corridors because it's going to cost so much money, and we absolutely mustn't do that.
I think in the spirit of thinking about wise ways to spend money, you know, being able to do it incrementally, asking for $10 billion and an investment of such significant amount of money it's really quite difficult. But to be able to have an incremental rolling program over time where we leverage knowledge. So through this investment, we've upskilled the market in tunnelling, we've upskilled the market in many aspects. If that doesn't continue incrementally over with palatable investment annually, I think, you know, there's an opportunity that we might, well, actually there's a risk that we might lose that skilled labour force. And then it becomes really difficult to deliver, and huge, you know, securing huge funding envelopes is quite difficult. But an incremental rolling program would be fantastic to deliver outcomes and becomes palatable.
We've seen that before, haven't we, with the skill base even for construction and building. So if in 2032 there's an 8-year gap before the next rail line, then that's a problem, isn't it? And I heard a message from Kerry there, when you're spending your $1 billion from Alba planning southwest, then consider the freight corridor as well. Trudi, what would you do?
I'm going to just take a bit of licence and answer all of those questions about services before I say where I'd spend the money, because they came up in all the sessions, and I think it's a fair question for you to ask, and I'm here, so I want to answer them. So will we have enough services, and is it right that it's going to take an hour to get from the southwest to the airport? Well, we've got $327 million, and we need to use buses as the suburban heavy lifter and give people choice where they don't have choice now. They only have choice of a vehicle to get them to a rail station or to another bus stop where they don't even have services within their area. So we are making the choice to use that funding to create 6 new routes that will get people who don't otherwise have an option on a bus service. Does it take too long? Is it rapid? No, but I've been honest with you all before about that. What I think is important then is that this is raising recognition that we do need express services and night ride, and I'm working with Simon and the team about worker access. We know that we need to address that, and we are looking at incremental funding and programs to be able to do that. So I just wanted to acknowledge all of those comments. So if I had $10 billion, we'd work through the list, but I would ask if we could move some of it to OPEX and put more services in. Because I think in all of the work we do, we talk about capital and infrastructure, and Transport is a services organisation. We're here for our passengers and communities, and I would love to see more money on services.
Thanks, Trudi. And Edgar, you've seen the world's best in technology. Where would you spend your $10 billion enhancing our probably you'd be focused on the metro program, right?
Well, it's a difficult. I would say that the first thing to really could spend the money is to choose the proper system. What you did here with automated metro is a good choice because it's very resilient, safe, of course, flexible. You can inject trains whenever you want. So the service is really a lot better using these systems. Of course, afterwards, you have to collect data to improve maintenance or to give passenger information systems, connected passengers with apps or whatever. And this is really a good factor to improve the service and make people like your new system, of course. Otherwise, well, it's not really about technology, but organization to make sure that the public will like and use the system as much as it can. You have to bring people to your network, so the question of buses. So what we are doing right now in Riyadh is rerouting the buses. And in terms of the region development, investing money also in mixed-use buildings, maybe smart. What we are doing in Paris, just for instance, when we create or renew a depot for trains, on top of it, we have social housing for our staff or for other people. And we have kindergarten, and we have commerce, etc. So it's all together, and it's a way to attract people. And it's a good way to use public money as well. And it's a way to bring kind of technology, people to technology, to this new metro system.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Edgar. So I think we've cracked it as a team. So as I hear it, we're going to extend the metro north and south. We're going to put money into more services to support the surrounding cities. We're going to make sure we've got a fuel line to Western Sydney Airport and dedicated freight corridors. And we're going to activate the precincts around with good transport and world-class buildings. Easy. Let's get on with it. Thank you, panel. Thanks, everybody.